Okay, chant Mangalacharan. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrisabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha पतितनाम पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we are discussing chapter 12 now.
12, okay.
So we discussed 11 is finished as last week, and from this week we start chapter 12. So this is the last chapter of middle section. So the first section was karma yoga, most talks about karma, and the last section talks about jnana. So 1 to chapter 6 is more about karma, and chapter 7 to chapter 12 is bhakti yoga, and last chapter is jnana yoga. So this is the last chapter for the middle section or bhakti yoga, and the title of this chapter is devotional service or bhakti yoga. So here we'll see how Krishna establishes the supremacy of bhakti yoga. So in previous chapter 11, when Krishna says mat karma krita, so offer everything to me, do or worship or work for me, and then by saying this, which is basically the supremacy of bhakti yoga being established already in the previous chapter itself by Krishna, when Arjuna inquires a question about what is best, the bhakti yoga or karma yoga, or worshipping you directly or worshipping as an impersonal Brahman. So which is better, the personality or impersonality? And then Krishna explains about this, clarifies Arjuna more to us as well, and then he explains about the progressive stages of bhakti, and then he speaks about the qualities of one who is dear to Lord Krishna again, right? So these are the sections of this chapter. There are 4 sections. One question, verse 1 is a question asked by Arjuna. It's a very small chapter, but having a very deep meaning in this chapter. And then from 2 to 7, Krishna explains about the personality and impersonal worship. And then from 8 to 12, Krishna progressively he says that the stages of the bhakti. And then in concluding 7 slokas, he concludes about the qualities of the devotees and who endeavor for Krishna's. So let's start from verse 1. Text 1, verse 1. Arjuna uvacha evam satata yukta ye evam satata yukta ye bhaktas Tvam parupasate bhaktas tvam parupasate ये
ये
चापे
चापे
अक्षरम
अक्षरम
अव्यक्तम
अव्यक्तम
ये चापे अक्षरम अव्यक्तम
ये चापे अक्षरम व्यक्तम
तेषाम
तेषां
के
के
योग
योग
वित्तिमाः
वित्तिमाः
तेषाम के योग वित्तमाः
तेषां के
योग
योगतमः
वित्तिमाः
अर्जुन उवाच
अर्जुन उवाच
अर्जुनोवाच
एवं सततयुक्ता ये
एवं तदयुक्ता ये
वित्तासि
भक्तास्त्वां भक्तास्त्वां
भक्तास्त्वं
पर्युपासते
भक्तास्त्वां पर्युपासते
रूपस्ते
ये चाप्य अक्षरमव्यक्तम्
ये चाप्यक्षरमव्यक्तं
अक्षरं व्यक्तं
तेषां के योगवित्तमा
तेषां
तेषां योग वित्तमा
Arjuna Vacha, Arjuna said, Evam, thus, Satata, always, Yuktaha, engaged, ye, those who, Bhaktaha, devotees, Tvam, you, Parupasate, properly worshipping. Ye, those who, Cha, also, Api, again, Aksharam, beyond the senses, Avaktam, them, unmanifested, Tesam, of them,
I see the empty box going Southampton tomorrow will
who,
confirm.
Yoga with Tamaha, the most perfected in knowledge of yoga. Translation: Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be the most perfect, those who are always properly engaged in a devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? So, this is normally very important question for us in devotional service, devotional life, and even in the practice of spirituality. Many times we see about this too. There are many philosophers. There are many organizations. Even everything talks about spirituality, but they say everything as impersonal Brahman is the essence. This is the end. Even from impersonal Brahman, Krishna has come out. Right. So they say that this is the essence, and here we need the goal of life is to merge in the Brahman. And and there are another the devotees. They talks about engaging in devotional service. So the two things again here. Krishna speaks about impersonal Brahman in chapter 9, and then speaks about devotional service in almost every chapter, even from chapter 2 itself, right? So everywhere this topic comes up, and this is a very important question Arjuna asking to Krishna, that what is better, which are considered more perfect, right? Those who are properly engaged in your devotional service, or who worship the impersonal Brahman, which is the best one? Arjuna is asking. So impersonal Brahman is unmanifested, and devotional service is actually who are engaging in worshipping Krishna himself, as Krishna spoke in last verse of previous chapter, right? So, and there Krishna spoke about this in last verse of last chapter, where it says, mat karma krit mat parmo mat bhakta sanga varjita Nirvair sarvabhuteshu yah mama iti pandava. So he says, he who works for me, considering me the supreme, who is devoted to me without material attachment, without enmity towards any living being, will surely attain me, O Arjuna. So attaining Krishna, or attaining the spiritual world, Krishna is saying, one who works for me, considering me as supreme. When he says me as supreme, it means there is a person. So, and Krishna speaks in chapter 9 as well about impersonal Brahman. So there are Gyanis, especially Gyanis, they worship impersonal Brahman, and they think that this is the ultimate goal. Right. So there are three categories. One is Gyanis, one is Yogis, and one is Bhaktas. So Gyanis, they tend to impersonal Brahman as the supreme, and the next level, the Yogis thinks about Paramatma as the supreme. However, Bhakta, he takes the highest level, that is the supreme person. So that this question, as it makes very important, and Prabhupada writes a long purport so that make us clear about this topic, and this is very very important topic to understand in our spirituality. So let's see how Prabhupada continues saying, and we'll see what Krishna answering as well. So the purport of Prabhupada and Krishna's what explaining how is he's saying that which is the better, which is the best, because answer being asked by Arjuna, question being asked by Arjuna, that please let me know which is more perfect from these two, right? So purport by Prabhupada, Krishna has now explained about the personal, the impersonal and universal form. So we have seen universal form in previous chapter. Krishna speaks about impersonal, he also speaks about person, has all described in kinds of devotees and yogis. So generally the transcendentalist can be divided into two classes. One, the impersonalist, and other is personalist. So the personalist devotees, they engage himself with all the energy in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is a personalist or the devotees, the bhaktas. And the impersonalist also engages himself not directly in the service of Krishna, but in meditation on the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. So even the Gyanis also, the yogis also, they start meditating on the impersonal Brahman, right? So, and we find in this chapter that of the different processes of realization of absolute truth, bhakti yoga or devotional service is the highest, and we'll see how Krishna is actually clarifying this doubt to Arjuna, and also it actually makes an important point to us as well. So if one at all desires to have association of Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he must take to devotional service. There is no other way to realize Krishna as a Supreme Being, right? So I'll go into almost all the purpose because it's very important purpose rights and a very important topic to discuss as well. Understanding those who worship the Supreme Lord directly by devotional service are called personalists. So they understand that Supreme, who is Supreme, is a person. He is not impersonal, and then they engage themselves in devotional service to the Lord, right? Maybe in different ways, like cooking prasadam, cooking bhoga to Lord, and offering prasadam to Lord, and then maybe deity worship, and maybe bathing the deities, doing dressing to them, and all the things. So they engage themselves to worship Supreme Lord as a person. And those who engage themselves in meditation on the impersonal Brahman are called impersonalists. So they think that impersonal is everything, that Brahman is everything, that's the essence, right? So Arjuna is questioning here, which position is better? There are different ways to realize the absolute truth, but Krishna indicates that in this chapter, the bhakti yoga or devotional service to him is the highest of all. So Krishna very clearly explains this point in just next verse, answering Arjuna. Prabhupada mentioned earlier in this purport itself, but next verse itself Krishna explains this thing, that devotional service to him is the highest of these two, and it is most direct and it is easiest means of association with the Godhead, right? And then in this paragraph, Prabhupada says about the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord explains that a living entity is not the material body, he is a spiritual spark, and the absolute truth is a spiritual whole. In 7th chapter, Krishna spoke of living entity as a part and parcel of the Supreme Whole and recommended that he transfer his attention fully to the whole. Then again in a chapter, it was said that anyone who thinks of Krishna at the time of quitting his body at once transfer to the spiritual sky. So if you see, in every aspect, even earlier Krishna says that is a part and parcel of the Supreme, and anyone who thinks of Krishna, he goes to the spiritual world. So it's clearly mentioning that Krishna is Supreme Person. We cannot think of something which is void, which is null. We need to think of something who is there, who is an object, right? So if just imagine, if someone asks you to think, okay, don't think about elephant, as soon as we listen it, we see a picture of elephant in our eye, right? Then we can see it. So we cannot, it's very difficult to meditate on something void, and that's how the yogis they spend thousands and thousands of years realizing it, meditating on it. But bhakti is very very easy. Just bhakta, they can directly see Krishna in the altar and then say, okay, here is Krishna, here is how he looks like, and then they start worshipping him, right? So that's how point is Prabhupada making from different chapters, how Krishna is saying that Krishna is a person. And at the end of 6th chapter of the Lord clearly mentioned that from all the yogis, one who always think of Krishna within himself is considered the most perfect. Right? So again, how can you think of Krishna? Is actually a person, then only you can think of Krishna. So in practically every chapter, Prabhupada conclude here, in every chapter the conclusion has been that one should be attached to the personal form of Krishna for that the highest spiritual realization. Nevertheless, there are those who are not attached to the personal form of Krishna. They are so firmly detached that even in the preparation of commentaries of Bhagavad Gita, they want to distract other people from Krishna and transfer all devotion to impersonal Brahma Jyoti. So this is how people, sometimes many great leaders, they deviate the instruction of Bhagavad Gita towards impersonal Brahman and thinking that Supreme Lord is impersonal. That's the sense. So that's how Prabhupada says that this is the how people distract, manipulate, speculate things. Right? They prefer to meditate on a personal form of absolute truth, which is beyond the reach of senses and is not manifest. So factually, there are two classes of transcendentalists. Now Arjuna is trying to settle the question of which process is easier and which of the class is most perfect. Even in Bhagavatam, it's being said that no, in one verse said Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagwan is Sabdhi. So the three things, Brahmeti, the impersonal Brahman, Paramatmeti, the supreme soul or super soul which is within us, and Bhagwan, these are actually the same person. It's not different, but the level of revelation is different to the different processes, right? So in other words, he is clarifying his own position because he is attached to the personal form of Krishna. He is not attached to impersonal Brahman. He wants to know whether his position is secure or not, right? However, the real essence is, we is clearing our doubt as well. The impersonal manifestation, either in this material world or in the spiritual world of the Supreme Lord, is a problem for meditation. It's very, very difficult to meditate on that. And Prabhupada makes a very important point here that actually one cannot perfectly conceive of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth. It's not possible actually. It's very difficult even. And therefore, Arjuna wants to clarify so what it is. So, and what the use of such a waste of time. So that's how the essential question is, and though it's very small chapter, but it brings a very, very important understanding about the impersonal and personal conception of the absolute truth, right? Even the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, he explains these things very clearly as well, and Prabhupada writes a long elaborate part of the first verse of Bhagavatam, right? So let's see text 2 what Krishna answers. So as of now, we are very much clear about the question being asked by Arjuna, that what is better, who is better, a personalist or impersonalist, a person who is worshipping you in devotion, or one who is worshipping the impersonal Brahman, who is better, who is in the best position? Let's see what Krishna answered directly. Text 2, please repeat after me. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Vacha
श्रीभगवानुवाच
Mayaveshya
Mayavesya
Mano
मनो
Ye
Ye
ये
Mam. Mayavesha Mano Ye Mam.
Mayavesya Mano Ye Mam
Nitya
Nitya
नित्य
Ta
Yukta
युक्त
Upasate.
Upasate
उपासते
Nitya Yukta Upasate.
Yayukta
नित्य युक्त
Upasate
उपासते
Shraddhaya
Shraddhaya
श्रद्धया
Parayopetas.
प्रयोपेतास
Shraddhaya Parayopetas.
Shraddhaya
श्रद्धया परयोपेतास
Te
Me
Te
Te
Me
Te Me
Yukta
Yukta
युक्त
Ama
Ma
Mataha.
Mataha
अतः
Te Me Yukta Tama Mataha.
ते मे युक्ततमा मताः
Let's read once again. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
श्रीभगवानुवाच
Maya Vaishya Mano Ye Mam
मयावेश्य मनो ये माम्
एवं
Nitya Yukta Upasate
नित्ययुक्त
नित्ययुक्तौ
उपासते
Shraddhaya Parayopetas
श्रद्धया
तया परयोपेतास्
Te me Yukta Tamamatah.
ते
ते
मे
मे युक्त
युक्ततमामतः
Clearly, Krishna answers clearly to Arjuna, and then Krishna explains about his more. So Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Mai, upon me, Avesha, fixing Manah, the mind, ye, those who Mam may, Nitya, always, Yukta, engaged, Upasate, worship, Shraddhaya, with faith, Paraya, transcendental, Upeteh, endowed, they, me, by me, Yuktatama, most perfect in yoga, Mataha are considered. Clearly answering Krishna. Right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who fix their mind upon my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be the most perfect. We got the answer. We discussed for 10-15 minutes about the question that worshipping personally a personalist or impersonalist, who is better and who is in a higher position. Krishna says anyone who fixes their mind on my personal form, like maya vesha manaha, right? And how it is very important, he says nitya, always, yukta, he engaged in worship with shraddhaya, with faith. So worshipping Krishna with faith, with shraddha, these are considered to be most perfect. And if you see in previous chapters, in chapter 6 again Krishna says, chapter 5 again Krishna says the same point, again concluding verse of each chapter, right? From all the yogis, anyone who worship me with full faith, right? Yogina sarvesham mad atmana shraddhavan bhajati yo mam samayuktamatah. Already Krishna answered this in chapter 6. Again he says shraddhaya, with shraddha, with faith, anyone who worship me from all the yogis, karma yogi, jnana yogi, dhyana yogi, ashtanga yogi, bhakti yogi, all the yogis, niskama karma yogi, uh, any can think of all the karma, all the yogis. Krishna already says in chapter 6 that anyone who worship me with faith is the topmost. And the same thing Krishna repeated here again, that those who fix their mind on my personal form and engage in worshipping me is considered the most perfect. So answer is already given, right? So in answers to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worship him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect yogi. So the conception of impersonalism, or understanding that Krishna comes from impersonal, or Krishna is the impersonal, the source of Krishna, is not a correct understanding. Impersonal is there, Brahmajyoti is there, but there is it is not the essence, or this is not the end. So the jnanis, they reach till the first step of realization. The yogis, they go to the second step of realization. However, bhaktas, they go to the third step of realization, where they understand. So there are three aspects. Satchit Anand, right? In one stage, one is being revealed and understood, right? So the jnanis, when they understand about impersonal Brahman, they understand that actually uh, they think that this material world is actually full of miseries. Thus understanding is correct. However, they miss out that there is a spiritual world where there is no miseries. So they wanted to merge in Brahman and become inert, no more work. I don't want to work. So because they think that work is actually is the cause of this cycle of birth and death. Birth is working, acting is the cause of this whole cycle of birth and death in this material world. And hence they try to prevent themselves from work and try to meditate so that they can merge in impersonal Brahman. However, Krishna explained that already in chapter 2, right? And yeah, that three things comes: action, inaction, karma, akarma, and vikarma, right? So akarma is what? Akarma is not it's not about restraining from work. Akarma is working, however, with detachment, working just as a duty and offering a result to the Lord, working within a sense of not or working with the mentality of not enjoying the work but working as a duty, right? He's become detached from it. So that's the point. So Gyani thinks that this material world is a misery, so we need to go somewhere else, and they think the Brahman is the one where actually I can merge and I can be there, right? But that's not the essence. Krishna very clearly explains here that there is something higher than that, right? So for one, in such Krishna consciousness there are no material activities, but everything is done for Krishna. That's the point we discussed now: karma, karma, and vikarma. So in Krishna consciousness, if you are working for the Lord, it's not bad to have good car, good family, good money, it's all good, but the how we engage our things, that has a result. If I have a lot of money and if I engage my money in some illicit business or some intoxication and other things, I'm using those in a very, very wrong way, and that will come back to me. However, if I'm using that for service of Krishna, Prabhupada says, if you have money, you can build a nice temple, big temple. What's wrong in that? And building one temple, it's not about just building one temple. Many people comes to the temple, and they, by seeing the deities, they get blessings of the Lord. And it's not you build a temple for one time and it goes for years and years and years and years, right? So that's the way how can we engage our service, our material things what we have towards service of Krishna. So a pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, and sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not to let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such is excellence called as full of samadhi. So this is a real samadhi. It's not samadhi like where sitting one place and completely trance. I can't hear anything, I can't see anything. No, it's not that. The real samadhi is engaging our activities towards Krishna, as Krishna explains in the previous verse, last verse, right? So Krishna clearly answers about what is best. So the conception of impersonalism is there, but that's not completely correct. There is something higher. It's like in the axis, right? In the axis, we see with a 0 point, right? And then we see the positive numbers and we see negative numbers. So being in the negative number is not good. So the gyan is they come from negative number to 0, but they miss to go higher the ladder, right? And that's how will be revealed more and more in this chapter, that bhakti yoga is engaging ourselves in Krishna consciousness is much better than uh, thinking that everything is Brahman. And again, Krishna clearly answered this here itself: those who fix their minds on my personal form and engage in worshipping me with great transcendental faith are considered to the most perfect. What is the time? Okay, we can go to more verses, cover as much possible. Yeah, text 3 and text 4. Please repeat. Ye te
Ete
aksharam
aksharam
anirdesham.
Nirdesham.
anirudesham.
Ye te aksharam anirdesham.
Ete aksharam anirudesham.
Avaktam
Aviktam
Vaktam.
parupasate
Parupasate.
parupasate.
sarvatra
Sarvatra.
Sarvatra
gam
gam
Gam.
intyam
Intyam.
intyam
cha
Intyam cha.
cha.
sarvatra gam chintyam cha.
सर्वत्र
सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च
कूट
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 च
तं
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 चलं
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 ध्रुवं
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 कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम्
कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम्
अचलं ध्रुवम्
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਚ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਹੋ
संयमेन्द्रिया
संयमेन्द्रिय
मेन्द्रिय
ग्रामं
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 सर्वत्र
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 समबुद्धय
समबुद्धय
संयमेन्द्रियं ग्रामं
सर्वत्र
तन्निमिन्द्रियं ग्रामं
सर्वत्र समबुद्धय
सर्वत्र
सर्वत्र समबुद्धया
ते
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 प्राप्नुवन्ति
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 मामेव
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 ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव
ते
ते
प्राप्नुवन्ति
प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव
सर्व
सर्वा
भूत
भूत
इत
हिते
हिता
रता
हिते रता
इते रथा
सर्वभूत हिते रता
सर्वभूत
सर्वभूतहिते रथा
Let's read once again. ये ते अक्षरम् अनिर्देश्यम्
ये
ये
ते
इति अक्षरं निर्देशम्
निर्देशम्
अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते
अव्यक्तं
अव्यक्तं तरुपासते
सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च
सर्वत्र
सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यन्त
कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम्
कूटस्थं
कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम्
संयमेन्द्रियं ग्रामम्
अन्यमिन्द्रियं ग्रामं
सर्वत्र समबुद्धयः
सर्वत्र
सर्वत्र समबुद्धया
ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव
ते
ते प्राप्नुवन्ति मामेव
प्राप्नुवन्ति
सर्वभूतहिते रताः
सर्वभूतहिते रता
So, ye those who do but aksharam, that which is beyond the perception of the senses, anirdesham, indefinite, avaktam, unmanifested, paryuspasate, completely engaged in worshipping, sarvatragam, all pervading, achintya, inconceivable, cha also, kutastham, unchanging, achalam, immovable, dhruvam, fixed, sanyam, controlling, Indriya Gramam, all the senses, Sarvatra, everywhere, Samabodhyaya, equally disposed, they, Prapnuvanti, achieve, Mam, me, certainly, Sarabhuta hite, for the welfare of all living entities, Rataha engaged. So, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed, and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such person engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. So it becomes very, very difficult to do all the things. However, there's a process, and they when they engage in the welfare of all, at last they achieve me. So Prabhupada says the purport, those who do not directly worship the Supreme Lord, but who attempts to achieve the same goal by the indirect process, also ultimately achieve the same goal. Sri Krishna, after many, also ultimately achieve the same goal, Sri Krishna. However, after many births of men of wisdom, seeks refuge in me, knowing that the Vasudeva is all. So when a person comes to full knowledge after many births, he surrenders unto Lord Krishna. And if one approaches the Godhead by the method of mentioned in the verse, he has to control the senses, render service to everyone, and engage in the welfare of all beings. It is inferred that one has to approach Lord Krishna. Otherwise, there is no perfect realization. Often, there is much penance involved before one fully surrender to unto him. So there is a lot of different engagement is required there as well, controlling the minds and everything, the senses and things. However, at the end, they need to engage themselves in the welfare of, they need to understand engage themselves in devotional service of the Lord, at last they can achieve Krishna, right? So in order to perceive the super soul within the individual soul, one has to see the sensual activities of seeing, hearing, tasting, and working, etc. So see here, the process of worshipping impersonalism is the one has to cease his activities. However, in the case of bhakti, one can engage his activities. He can see, he can use his sense of sight for seeing Krishna's form in the temple. He can engage his senses of hearing by for hearing Krishna Katha. For taste, he can engage his tongue for tasting nice palatable prasadam, and he can engage his whole activities for working for Krishna. So it becomes very easy rather than ceasing the activities. And Krishna said earlier, that the one who tends to show these things but internally he has some different motive, he is a pretender, right? So it's very, very important to understand this concept of impersonalism and personalism. Okay, so then one comes to understand that Supreme Soul is present everywhere. Realizing this, one invents no living entity, no envious towards any living entity. He sees no difference between the man and animal because he sees soul only and not the outer covering. But the common man, this method of impersonal realization is very, very difficult, right? So this takes another level of Brahman, from impersonal Brahman to Paramatma, where they realize that every living entity, there is a super soul within that, regardless of any man, animal, or living entity, or whomsoever it is, right? This body is just outer covering, but soul is there. He sees the soul. So as a Paramatma, he realizes Paramatma as yogi. But this is very, very, it's not common. It's actually rare, right? So, okay. So these two verses define the process and destination of impersonal Brahman worshipper. Ultimately, they need to engage themselves in Krishna's service somehow or other, and that's also being given explained by Kapila Dev to Mother Dehuti as well. That even though we can follow all the different paths of Dhyana Yoga or Jnana Yoga, unless and until we come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, our endeavor will not finish. So why to spend time in going through that way? If I can hold, like in Hindi says, why to hold the ears from different way if I can hold from this very easily. So the Bhakti Yoga process is very easier as compared to the different yoga process, and especially in Kali Yoga, it's become more difficult for other processes. So that's how Mahaprabhu says in Kali Yoga that by chanting the holy name of the Lord, which is not different from Krishna, and we have seen this many a time in many of our discussions earlier, that how Krishna is not different from his name, and by taking shelter of Krishna's name, we can revive our lost identity and engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness, and we can actually go back to spiritual world. Right. So we'll stop here. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll stop and continue to next week. Next week, yeah, we'll continue next week. There might be a chance we might not continue next week. I might have to travel, but that's not completely fixed yet. So I'll inform beforehand. Okay. Okay, if there is no question, we can stop here. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भगवद गीता की
की जय
Jai.
प्रभुपाद की
जय
तो वैष्णव वृंद